Live NFL trivia every Tuesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge and have a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation.
New York Jets first round selection, fullback, Roger Vick, Texas A&M.
You all know this moment. It's one of the most famous moments in the history of the NFL draft. When you think of the Jets drafting in the first round, this is one of the first things that comes to mind. Everything about this moment is absolutely perfect. The fact that Pete Rozelle completely trolled Jets fans by saying the position before the player. The fan who yelled out what had to be a cry for help. The little smirk that Rozelle gives when he hears the reaction. When you think of the name Roger Vick, odds are you don't think of anything that he did on the field. You think of that one fan and that great moment in draft history. But there's way more to this story that you may not realize. We need to ask ourselves a few questions. Why did the Jets draft a fullback? And in particular, this fullback in the first round? What did he do afterwards? Was this pick worth it? And did it at the very least make sense at the time? This is the complete story of Roger Vick, arguably the most infamous draft pick in the history of the New York Jets. To fully tell this story, we need to go all the way back to 1984, where the New York Jets drafted fullback Tony Page in the 6th round. When Page was drafted, he became one of the top fullbacks in all of football. During that 1984 season, he led the Jets with 8 touchdowns, and in 1985, he did it again, leading the team with 10 touchdowns. Page even scored a few game-winning touchdowns in the 4th quarter, including one against the Browns and one against the Bills as a rookie. New York had one of the best offenses in football during the 1985 season, and part of that was because of their stout running game led by Page, former 2nd-round pick Johnny Hector, and Pro Bowl running back Freeman McNeil. But in 1986, things went a bit south with regards to Page. Of his 3 years in the league, the third was by far his worst. Page was rotated in and out of the starting lineup. He had a career-low 109 rushing yards and a career-low 2 rushing touchdowns, while averaging a career-worst 2.3 yards per carry. After September, Page did not score a single touchdown, which was a far cry from his days of leading the team in touchdowns over the previous 2 years. The Jets had one of the best seasons in franchise history, going 10-6 and making it to the divisional round before losing in heartbreaking fashion to the Cleveland Browns in double overtime. But their running game was not very good, especially when compared to the rest of the decade, as the team ranked 23rd in yards per carry. After the 1986 season, it was time for the Jets and Page to renegotiate a contract. Negotiations started in February, but the two sides were making little to no progress whatsoever. Considering the fact that Page was coming off the worst year of his career and had declined in yards per carry every year, the two sides were far apart as to what his value was going to be. Page was playing for $115,000, and even though the Jets liked him and went as far as offering a 20% pay raise, Page declined the deal. He felt that a 20% increase on a 5th-round contract for a guy that led the team in touchdowns in 2 of the past 3 seasons was not good enough. Remember that back then, there was not free agency in the way that we envision it today. When the draft rolled around, there was serious doubt as to whether or not Page and the Jets would even be able to come to an agreement. And with that, fullback became somewhat of a need for the team. Entering the 1987 NFL Draft, there was one fullback atop everyone's board. That player was a man by the name of Roger Vick. While at Texas A&M, Vick had set the Southwest Conference by storm. In 1986, he led the conference with 960 rushing yards. He finished inside the top 3 in the conference in yards from scrimmage in each of the past 2 seasons. He scored double-digit touchdowns in each of the past 2 seasons. In fact, he was so good that he was just one of 6 players in college football to score at least 10 touchdowns from scrimmage in both 1985 and 1986. One of the main reasons why Texas A&M won the Southwest Conference that year was because of Vick's play. And when the 1987 NFL Draft rolled around, Vick was projected as a 1st-round pick. There's 2 things that we need to talk about before talking about what the Jets did. Number 1, fullbacks going in the 1st round was not a rare occurrence back then. It's not as though the Jets drafted a punter in the 1st round. In 1986, there were multiple fullbacks who were chosen in the 1st round, with Keith Byars going to the Eagles and John L. Williams going to the Seahawks. In 1983, the Lions drafted James Jones. And in 1980, the 49ers drafted Earl Cooper. While I'm not going to say it was extremely common, it was not unusual back then for a fullback especially a really good one, to get drafted high. And number 2, if the Jets chose Vick, this would not have been a reach in the slightest bit. I looked at a ton of mock drafts and draft articles from back then, and Roger Vick was mentioned in all of them. One writer for the New York Times suggested that the Giants could draft Vick with their first-round pick at pick number 28. Another mock draft in the New York Times had the 49ers drafting him at pick number 22. A mock draft in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette had the Niners drafting him at pick number 22 as well. And the legendary Dr. Z from Sports Illustrated had Vick going to the Vikings at pick number 16. This idea that we're making fun of the Jets for taking a fullback in the first round and reaching big is a whole lot of revisionist history, because with the Jets at pick number 21, it was right in line with where everyone expected Vick to be chosen. Seeing that Vick was still on the board, and seeing that the contract situation with Tony Page was not going to get better anytime soon, and seeing that the Jets had major needs everywhere, with head coach Joe Walton saying that the team could use help at just about every position, the Jets made their move. With pick number 21 in the 1987 NFL Draft, the New York Jets selected the Texas A&M fullback, Roger Vick. It was all downhill from there. Freeman McNeil gave Roger Vick some advice early on. He said if you come in like a dry sponge, not full of yourself, then you've got a chance. And it seemed like Vick took those words to heart. He spent hours upon hours studying the playbook in his Hofstra dorm with teammate Eddie Hunter. He spent so much time at Hofstra, where the Jets held training camp, that he never actually left campus or visited the city, saying doing the town can wait. It paid off, as on the first day of camp, Vick looked like a star. He looked like the guy that was the top runner in the Southwest Conference. Head coach Joe Walton said the player who stood out the most, without any hesitation, was Roger Vick, adding, "He's given us a dimension that the Jets haven't had in some time." The Jets were impressed with the padded practices, and when it came time to play other teams, he still looked the part. In a scrimmage against Washington, Vick averaged over 5 yards per carry. In a preseason game against Tampa Bay, he picked up 65 yards on 4 carries, one of which was a 53-yarder. He looked so good, in fact, that the Jets decided not to negotiate with Tony Page anymore. Any leverage that Page had at this point was completely gone. This meant that Vick was going to be the number 1 fullback for the Jets when it mattered most in the regular season. And when the regular season started, it all came crumbling down. His first impression was a bad one. In his second game against the Patriots, he had a fumble in the third quarter that was returned for a touchdown. The rest of the game wasn't strong either, as he finished with just 18 yards on 10 carries. The month-long strike that followed didn't help much either, as when the strike ended and Vick returned, offensive backfield coach Bobby Hammond said that all the players returning, Vick needed the most help. Turns out that prediction was right, as Vick began to lose some playing time as the season went on. It used to be that Johnny Hector and Freeman McNeil would alternate at running back, but midway through, Walton decided to experiment with a McHector backfield, where Hector, not Roger Vick, would play fullback. Part of the reason for this was an inability to do anything on the ground, but the other part was his surprisingly poor blocking. In a game against the Colts, he was responsible for allowing 2 sacks while picking up just 5 yards on 4 carries. He followed that up a few weeks later against the Bills, when on the final drive of the game, he dropped not 1, but 2 passes. We were entering December, and Vick had yet to find the end zone, or do anything productive outside of a few flashes here and there. Then it finally happened. On December 20th, history was made. In the second quarter, Roger Vick scored his first career NFL touchdown. It was from 5 yards out. A weight had been lifted off of Vick's shoulders. He was finally going to turn the nope, he fumbled a few drives later, leading the Eagles to scoring and eliminating the Jets from the playoff race. Vick only touched the ball 90 times in 1987, but he fumbled 3 times. Fumbling once every 30 touches is not ideal. It was a rough rookie year for Vick, who finished with just 257 rushing yards, and showed problems catching, blocking, and holding onto the ball. Maybe 1988 would be better, right? Well, not quite. Vick was desperate to prove himself. He put in the work in the offseason, showing up to training camp 13 pounds lighter. As he said, when you come in as a rookie, you think you've got to be big to get those linebackers. Now I worked out in the offseason running hills in Houston. It gave me full mobility on my legs and my body. He was hoping that this newfound speed would add an element to his game that was not there. But on literally the very first play of the preseason, Vick fumbled. He then suffered a mild knee sprain later in the game. This would be a sign of things to come, because the rest of the 1988 season was not much better. Yes, there were some bright spots, like his 1988 game against the Cleveland Browns, where in a 23-3 victory, he scored 2 rushing touchdowns. But those bright spots were few and far between. Because if Jets fans remember anything about Vick from a specific play standpoint, it's this one right here. November 20th, 1988. The Jets are traveling up to Buffalo in this absolutely critical game. At this point, the Jets are 5-5-1, and you've got a ton of teams fighting for the final wildcard spot in the wide-open AFC. The Colts, Patriots, Browns, Broncos, and Raiders are all 6-5. Basically, the Jets almost have to win this game. It's a tall order, especially against a Buffalo team that's 10-1 and looking like the class of the entire NFL at the moment, but it's one that has to be done. And it looks like the Jets are going to do it. It's a low-scoring affair with the game tied at 6 apiece. With 24 seconds left, the Jets are able to get in position to allow Pat Leahy to try a 40-yard field goal. As a complete side note, if you want to see another video I made about Pat Leahy, then click the card in the upper right corner. He hit from 40 yards earlier in the quarter. Get this kick, and you're going to win and pull off the upset. Instead, it gets blocked by the then 4-time Pro Bowl nose tackle Fred Smirlas. No good. We're going into overtime. New York gets the ball to start off the OT period, and on the second play, they give it to Roger Vick. Take a wild guess as to what happens next.
2nd and 6. Roger Vick caught, but he breaks away. And Vick loses the ball, and Buffalo's going to get it. The Bills have it. Cornelius Bennett has the ball at the 32-yard line of the Jets.
That's the story of his career right there. The Bills get the ball deep in Jet territory, and eventually Scott Norwood hits the game-winning 30-yard field goal. It's a heartbreaking loss for the Jets. After the game, the GOAT of the hour was Vick, who was inconsolable afterwards. He had teammates hugging him and telling him to forget about it, and that we win and lose as a team. But he took this loss hard. He said, "I'd rather answer questions Monday because my head is messed up right now." When Monday rolled around, he was still distraught, saying, "I'm still down because we have those guys beat. Physically, we beat them." The Jets missed the postseason, and Vick did not score a touchdown over the final 10 games of the season. It was another rough year for the first-round pick. The Jets weren't ready to give up on him just yet, but time was running out. In 1989, the pressure was on. It was now or never for Vick to make an impact in this league. And the coaching staff was still expecting big things from him. In training camp, Wallen said that Vick's pass catching skills were improving, and Hammond said that they've never really had a back who runs, blocks, and catches passes, and that Vick can add this dimension to the team. Amazingly enough, it seemed like that confidence and belief was going to pay off. In the first 3 weeks of the season, Vick scored a touchdown in every single game, and even had 80 rushing yards in a Week 2 game against the Cleveland Browns. In fact, after 3 weeks, he was one of just 12 players in the entire NFL to score a touchdown in each of the first 3 games. And in Week 3 against the Dolphins, with less than 2 minutes to go, Ken O'Brien hit Vick for the game-winning touchdown in a 40-33 victory. Those Jets-Dolphins games from the 80s and early 90s were incredible, and this one was no exception. But just as things were starting to look bright for Vick, they just as quickly came back down to reality. Over the next 4 games, Vick carried the ball 18 times for a grand total of 16 yards. There was a month-long stretch where he averaged less than 1 yard per carry. And while there were some occasional flashes, such as the game against the Chargers, where he had 76 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns in a 20-17 victory, they were not enough. Vick somehow led the Jets in touchdowns that season with 7, but it was incredibly misleading, as for every game where he looked the part, he had another 3 where he fell off the face of the earth. The Jets were atrocious in 1989, going 4-12, which signaled the end of the Joe Wallen era. In came Bruce Coslet and a brand new coaching staff, who had no affiliation to Vick whatsoever. It seemed like Vick would still be on the Jets as the team's starting fullback in 1990. However, when Coslet decided to start Brad Baxter at the position in the preseason, it seemed like it was the end of the road. Vick knew the writing was on the wall, saying about the move, "I feel life goes on regardless. I just give it my best shot. I feel good about Roger Vick." Vick had 23 carries for 57 yards in the preseason, while Baxter had 31 carries for 161 yards and a touchdown. It was clear with that performance that Baxter would be getting the nod, and with that, Vick's time was done. He was traded to the Eagles, and after touching the ball just 16 times in Philly during that 1990 campaign, would never play in the NFL again. Baxter would remain the team's starting fullback until 1995, and was instrumental in the Jets making the postseason in 1991 when he scored 11 rushing touchdowns, which was the third most in the league. You can learn more about the 91 Jets by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And before signing off, I'd be remiss if I didn't highlight the Jets' splendor a bit more by mentioning the other fullback drafted highly in 1987. Because 14 picks later, with their second-round pick, the Kansas City Chiefs chose Christian Okoye. Okoye became a two-time Pro Bowler who in 1989 led the league with 1,480 rushing yards while being named the first-team All-Pro. The Nigerian Nightmare is a member of the Chiefs Hall of Fame, and was undoubtedly a better pick and a player than Roger Vick was, who is regarded by many as one of the biggest first-round busts in Jets history. Now, Roger Vick had a somewhat strange NFL career, because he wasn't terrible. There were clearly flashes here and there, and there were moments where it looked like he was actually going to be really good. I think a lot of Jets fans thought after Vick caught that game-winning touchdown against the Dolphins and scored 3 touchdowns in 3 games that he was finally going to do it. But alas, he was not. Because today, when people think of Roger Vick, they think of that one fan who could see into the future and knew what was coming. They think of his words of wisdom when the Jets made the pick and Pete Rozelle announced it to the world. Oh no. Be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaredGator9 and subscribe to 60-second NFL History on YouTube. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters who help get the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.